The headmistress and the staff of Achimota did not deny the young man admission. They rather spelled out to the young man the rules and regulations of Achimota Senior High School. We cannot begin this day to start making exemptions for individual students based on their beliefs, based on their culture, based on their tradition, and based on many other issues. That will lead to a chaotic school environment. Because of this, NAGRA disagrees totally with the position of the management of the Ghana Education Service. And we are calling on the Ghana Education Service to redirect the headmistress and the staff of Achimota Senior High School to ensure that the rules and regulation of Achimota Senior High School, and indeed any other senior school, is abided by every student. Let me repeat that we are calling on the Director General and the management of Ghana Education Service to redirect the management of Achimota Senior High School to ensure that the students, and indeed everybody, abide by the rules and regulation of the school. We are also calling on parents to know that every school has its own rules and regulation, and they should read the rules and regulations of each school before they allow their children to apply to those schools. Now, people are talking about human rights. Let me inform everybody that human rights is better ensured in an environment of rules and regulation. NAGRAT welcomes anyone who will want to go to court on this issue and on issue of discipline in our schools. But that when that court issue comes up, NAGRAT will attach itself because we are an interested party. That court case will not be limited into the wearing of Rasta. It will be expanded into the establishment of rules and regulation of our schools. If the courts decide that everybody can do whatever he or she likes, you will all be our guests as teachers. We will also develop ways and means of ensuring that we have proper chaotic school environment. But until then, we expect that all school rules are to be obeyed. NAGRAT solidarizes with the management and teachers of Achimota Senior High School and any other senior high school to ensure that the school rules are obeyed. If any teacher feels intimidated, if any management feels intimidated or is intimidated, the full weight of the union will be brought in support of that management and those teachers in those schools. Thank you very much.
The information we are getting this afternoon is that the parents of the two students, Mr. Aswad Krabia and Mr. Teroy, they were supposed to have a meeting with the GS as well as the Achimota headmistress or administration at the GS office. But I think it's Mr. Aswad Krabia who was able to attend. He just came out of the meeting some few minutes ago and made me understand as counsel for the case is that the GS first has indicated that the so-called directive that the citizens of this country saw in publications some few days ago was just to quell the public outburst and then the media discussion. And so therefore, the GS really didn't mean what they said. That's number one. Number two, the Achimota headmistress has gone on record in this meeting sticking to the position that they would want the kids to cut off their dreadlocks before they can enter the school. So this is the latest information coming from this meeting. And so Ghana should be aware of how the matter has now unfolded. And at this meeting, the GS supported the position of the Achimota headmistress. So as I speak with you now, I can confidently and authoritatively state on your network. In fact, Joy FM is the first network to hear the current twist of the matter, that the GES publication we all saw some few days ago, in my word now, I can say was a facade. It was a fluke. It was just to deceive the citizens of this country to believe that the GES is stepping in to restore peace, only for it to be told today at the meeting that it was just to quell the media outburst, but the GES didn't mean it, and therefore the Achimota schools position that the kids have been admitted, but they must cut off their dreadlocks before they come. That's the only way they can come onto the campus. The GES supports that. So that is the latest in respect of that matter. The Rastafarian Council is very much surprised at this latest development. My sister, it is really a disservice to this country. If senior citizens of this country, who are managers of our public institutions, sometimes can even deceive the entire nation to the extent of getting the entire country to believe one thing and just in a few days turn around and put up a position that indicates that we didn't really mean what we said before.
Okay.
It's really a surprise.
So this has generated a very interesting conversation across the length and breadth of our country. Some people are for, others are against. But the question is, should we admit students who come to school with some notable differences? And they tell you it's their religion. In the 1930s, we had, Rastafarianism become a thing all the way from Jamaica. This morning, we get into the situation as it is currently, as we're discoursing on it. And joining us, Joel Nete is Vice President of the Old Achimota Association. They've been speaking. They put out a statement. We're going to be hearing from their Vice President. We also have joining the conversation Thomas Musa. He actually is with the Ghana National Association of Teachers. And we have Bright Apia, who is actually with Child Rights International. All of them will join to express different thoughts on the conversation. But we start with Mr. Nete. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining the conversation on the AM show.
Good morning, Ben. Thanks for having us.
Right.
And good morning to all your listeners and viewers.
Once again, we're grateful. Now, the Old Achimota Association has come through with its own release on the matter. But this wouldn't be the first time that we've, crossed paths with such a situation. Some have said that this is becoming anachronistic and all of that, the way we are approaching this matter. But maybe we'll start from the standpoint of the Ghana Education Service and whether you feel they interfered by sort of directing the school, your former school, or your school, I should say, to actually rescind its decision. You came out with that statement, Mr. Nete. Why did you feel it was necessary to come out with that?
Well, yes, the OA National Executive came out with that statement signed by our President, Professor Aite, because we thought we needed to be careful about the bad precedent that was being set. Now, the way schools are run is that the GES sets up governing boards for the various institutions. And if we all know about good corporate governance, once it is that there's a board in place, that board is then the supervisory body that ensures that the management of an institution is doing the right thing. So when it is that there are challenges, you expect that the governing board that you've set up yourself, which actually has GES representation, would be able to get together and deal with any issues that happen in the school. If for any reason the governing board is challenged, that governing board definitely will reach out to the mother organization, be it GES or the ministry or whatever it is, for support. But when it is that you have a governing board and then at the least provocation, the least challenge, the body that sets up this board then jumps in and gives instructions, then essentially what you're doing is that you're tying the hands of the governing board, and that's not proper corporate governance. So that was what our issue was with the GES. Now, the substance of what the GES itself said in terms of the instruction to admit the students, what I think is happening, unfortunately, is that with very much like everything else around this particular story, it's being given a spin to suit the narrative. And that's where I think we need to be careful. So as the Old Achimota Association, we definitely have had challenges with the GES as the central authority jumping in and as instructing not even the board, but directly the management of the school what to do and what not to do. So once you put that aside and you look at the substance of what GES said, I think this whole brouhaha is because, well, one of the reasons is because we're looking at the word admission on two different fronts. There's admission into the school based on the grades you get, based on your application to the schools, based on your posting. And then there's admission based on, now that you've been admitted into the school, you sign up to obey the schools, the constitution, the rules of the school. And so then you come into the school, you are admitted into the school. At the beginning of this whole narrative, I think, and I stand to be corrected, that the word was put out as if the Achimota School administration had refused to grant admission letters to the students, even though they had passed and had the requisite grades and had been posted. And so the students were not Achimotan students, so to speak. I want to believe that that's what made the GES jump in and say that essentially if the students have the required grades and have been posted, then admit them. But that wasn't the story. Our understanding is that the students had actually been given admission letters. So they had been admitted based on their grades. As part of that process, they had, of course, signed up to say, we will, everything that is required of a student. Obey school rules, do this and the other, pay this by this date, school reopens on this date, all of those things. It was now at the time when they had to come into school that the question of what they look like or how they are keeping their hair vis-a-vis now coming into school and what the school rule says became a question. So I think that we should just focus on what the substantive issues are. For a fact, the students were not denied admission into Achimota School. The students were asked to cut their hair in keeping with the rules and regulations of the school before they came into school to start the academic year. So that's the difference I think is important.
Let me just chip in this bit, Mr. Nete. And is denial not denial on whatever front or however you may couch it? Because whether, and indeed we've heard from the school itself saying that we did not deny them admission. Yes, they had gained admission, but the fact was that there are certain school rules they have to abide by. But the point to be made here is that one of the parents, for example, has intimated he's going to pursue the matter in court, that he's going to find another school for his child. What that simply means is that whichever way we couch it, this individual, this boy who from all indications is a very bright student, is actually being denied access to education, which he actually rightfully supposed, according to the system, qualifies for. Does it not still boil down to the same thing? Is it not discrimination?
No, it's not. Look, personally, I'm one who advocates for diversity, not just diversity, but inclusion. And indeed, in speaking about Achimota School in particular, one of the things that we learn, one of the things that Achimota Schools is set up to promote is diversity, whether it's with gender or with ethnicity. It's one of the things that is ingrained in your system once you attend Achimota School. So we will not be the ones to say we are discriminating based on something or the other. That said, there's also a place for school rules. The reason why school rules are put in place. Now, you can't, just because one individual or two individuals or several for them come and say that for whatever reason, culture, religion, whatever, will not subscribe to the school rules. And these are school rules that existed before you applied for the school. So in applying for the school, whichever school, one expects that you will check what it is, that it's not just the academics, it's everything in the school environment that informs a parent or a student to choose a school. So these are things that help us, or this particular school or other schools, guide and mold the children who come in to make them the citizens that we're all trying to make, the better citizens that we're trying to make our students, inculcating them. So having done your homework, if it is that you know that this is what this school stands for, these are their rules and regulations, isn't it also unfair on the school for you to come in at that point and then say, if I have to cut my hair, then you're discriminating against me. But you knew this. For me, like you saw in the OA statement, this debate is a healthy debate. We have to ask ourselves, there are a ton of school rules and other rules throughout this country where you have to ask yourself, are they still relevant? So the debate is good. But let's have the debate. Let's not get to a point where we are saying that school rules don't matter. Because when you open these floodgates, really, just because of people's culture, people's religion, anybody can come in any day and say that a myriad of school rules will not be obeyed, whether it's the rule about wearing uniforms, whether it's the rule about particular boarding houses based on gender, whether it's the rule about even lights out, will not be obeyed because my culture says otherwise, my this says otherwise. Those are the things you need to be careful about. So even if it is time to make changes, and when you look at my day in Achimota, the things that have changed are a lot for positive. So I don't think Achimota School, and indeed any school for that matter, will be necessarily against change. But change for me has to come in a way that is well thought out, it's a deliberate thought process, and it makes the whole better than the sum of its parts. So that for me is what we need to be careful about. So I don't think that it's an issue about discrimination or an issue about denying a particular brilliant child, for that matter, like you said, absolutely brilliant. And I'm sure Achimota School will welcome a person like that. We need good brains like that. But there has to be method to what it is that we do. Mr.
Nete, tell me this. What differentiates Achimota School? And I pose that question from this angle. There is the Osei Tretwe Senior High School, which faced the same situation, and they have admitted a student with locks. Yes, so there were some, hindrances, some impediments from the start, but they went ahead to admit the student. And I ask this because even per our constitution, nobody, no organization, no ministry, no department, no agency can come up with any rules, laws, regulations that contradict what the Constitution says. Our Constitution is clear. No discrimination, not based on creed, religion, not based on the skin color, not based on, whatever it is. So in this instance, I go back. Why is Achimota different, especially when another school faced with the same situation is adopting this measure? Is it that don't we maybe have some sort of level playing field when it comes to the regulations of the schools per what the law, our Constitution says? Should that not, have some relevance?
Absolutely. Look, Achimota School is not discriminating against these students. I've said that 1,000,001 times. Achimota School is open to all religions. When I was there were Muslims, there were Christians, there were African traditional religions, but the expression of it is guided based on what the school ethics itself suggests. So for instance, somebody who's an African, there was a gentleman who was 2 years ahead of me who practiced African traditional religion. Today, I think he works at the Ministry of Information as one of their PROs. Their practice suggests that they walk, he's Ghana like me, they walk barefooted. How do you expect that to be implemented or accepted within a school environment? So there are challenges. Was it Osei Tretwe you said? Hello?
Yes. Osei Tretwe, that's what I said.
Yes. I mean, I don't know what their school rules are, but they've admitted the students, I think, is good. If their school rules or the rules of the school allow them to do that, that's a good thing. I don't have an issue with that at all. I just think that Achimota is evolving. We have rules. We have rules that are for the whole. We have easily 2,000 students. We've got to be careful that how these things come into play, because look, change is good, but in my opinion, we should have a deliberate and sound review like the OA has called for. And if it is that we can manage all of the, look, the thing about Rastafarianism or any religion is how you express it. What I want us to be careful about is saying that Achimota School is not accepting Rastafarians. Definitely not the issue. Achimota School has an issue with how students, male and female, keep their hair.
But the point to be made, Mr. Nete, the point to be made, I keep saying, it boils down to the very same point. You may say that you are not admitting or you are not refusing to admit Rastafarians, but the point to be made is that with all these impediments in place, that is what it boils down to. You are not accepting Rastafarians. That's what it means.
We are not accepting any students who are keeping their hair any different from what the school rules suggest. I don't think the length of hair or the locks is the only expression of Rastafarianism. It's not. Is it?
Tell me, Mr. Nete, what do the school rules really reflect when it comes to a dress code, when it comes to how people wear their hair and all of that? What is the specificity? Do tell us.
Oh, I don't know. I don't think I remember off the top of my head, but we have a document that becomes the Bible of Achimota School called the Blue Book. It talks about uniformity. It talks about things like the length of the ladies' dresses. It talks about the color coding. It talks about look, Achimota School from the very beginning brought in students, as we say, from Gambaga to Accra, from Yosu to Keta. One of the things that we try to do is to try to create an environment of uniformity so that things like class, things like the level of wealth of parents and stuff like that are reduced to the very barest minimum. Even that, things will still come through. But you try to create an environment, an even playing field for students who have come in from all walks of life to come in and flourish based on their own natural strengths. So that's what guides these rules and regulations. Not to make exceptions for people's class, people's religion, because you always, and another thing I want us to remember is that we are dealing here not with adults, but with children, it says teenagers. And we've all been teenagers. And we know that if you don't have rules that guide what people do, they will come up with all kinds of stories. So I give an example. What if somebody says, okay, that tomorrow, and that's why I think it's careful. We need to be careful that we don't reduce this argument to just a hairstyle argument. What if tomorrow some child comes in and says, look, I'm a male child, says, I identify as female, and so I want to move into Kingsley House, a girl's house. How do you stop this? The guy genuinely says he identifies as female, so he's walked into the female bathroom. How do you stop this? And that's why it's important that you have rules. Now, if with time, the rules need to be modified, so be it. And we're happy to have a debate to see how best to change these rules. But just to change them because one or two individuals say, my culture says I should do this, and so therefore, if you don't let me in, you're infringing on my rights. Let's be careful, because once you open those floodgates, you actually open it up to almost ridiculous demands from students of that age, who really are just seeking their own pleasure in some cases. Well, but then that's their right.
But you would also admit that sometimes it takes one person like Galileo for change to come in the thinking of men on different fronts. At least in that sense, it was about whether the world was flat or spherical.
I 100% agree with you. And I don't have issue. My issue is the way this has been handled. So, for instance, I go back to the point about this is a child who applied. Achimota School have always made exemptions. So, for instance, back when I was there were exemptions for everything, especially medical reasons. If it is indeed that you have a medical reason or a health reason why you can't do something, you go in, you bring in a medical report, you are giving a check, you are allowed to do what it is that your health permits you to do. If it is that the Rastafarian Council, for instance, had started or starts now an advocacy trying to explain to the world what it is that their issues are, why this, that, and the other, we can have a more holistic conversation about, look, can you modify this? And not just on an Achimota School conversation. This is where GES will come in schools. But when you wait, when you choose a school that has rules, and on the day that you are being admitted, suddenly then say, I want to go into this school, but I am not ready to follow its rules and regulations. This is what you get. So if, as a council, the Rastafarian Council, I think that's what they're called, want to go out on advocacy to GES, to schools in Ghana, to the Ghanaian populace and everything. It's a good thing to do. Let's do that. Let's weigh the pros and cons. Let's see the merits and demerits, and let's make the appropriate adjustments. But I think that the way this has been handled is the reason why we are here, where we are today.
So if I get you correctly, I'll go to something else that you said a short while ago. But let's picture a Samson, a biblical Samson in this modern context. You're suggesting then that if the person said, for example, that apart from my religion, so I can produce proof that medically speaking, I must not shave my head. I must leave my hair to grow natty, to be kinky and all of that. That would be okay, but not on the standpoint of religion. If a doctor, so if someone comes with locks and says, well, medically speaking, for some reason, I can't take off my locks. It is medical, it is scientific, I can back it up. That one the school would accept.
Oh, absolutely. I don't know about scientific, but if it's medical and impinges on the person's health, I'm pretty certain the school will accept that. We have lots of exceptions. Look, for instance, there are asthmatic patients. One of the things that we do in Achimota School for health reasons is morning trotting and all of that, jogging. There were lots of asthmatic patients who had, back in my day, and I'm sure it applies today, who had medical chits that said, for whatever reason, or this person can't do it at all, or can't do it for a certain duration, or we're bringing the kids up to learn how to clean up, how to weed, how to keep a compound clean. This asthmatic patient can't do XYZ, can't do this kind of work because of the dust or this, that, and the other. They were giving exemptions. So I'm 100% clear in my mind that if this was a medical reason, an exemption will be made. But you've got to be careful because, like I said, if you don't have good reason for making exceptions, you're just opening the floodgates to teenagers who will abuse it. And you definitely don't want that. You're teaching these students, the overall picture is that you're teaching these students to be law-abiding citizens. You're teaching them to follow a certain path, how to obey rules and regulations. And we don't all like rules and regulations, by the way. Back in the day, I listened to so much reggae in Achimota School. Some people started calling me Achimota School and Lagos a Rastafarian, even though I never wore locks. So I have my own, beyond Rastafarianism, locks, reggae, all of those things. We all have our own desires, the things that we like to do that are not necessarily what the society approves of. But if you are not guided, then really, where are we going from here? So I think bottom line, we just need to understand what rules and regulations are, what it is that schools are trying to do for these kids as they become the adults that rule our various nations, how to obey rules and regulations. And by all means, if there are genuine exceptions, yes, exceptions will always be made. But let's always remember, for me, that the whole will always be greater than the sum of its parts. And let's be sure that by what we're doing now, we're not setting precedents where parents and children or students or teenagers decide that I'm above any rule and teach them that depending on how much noise you make, you can avoid obeying school rules or any other rules outside of school for that matter. I think that this is a dangerous precedent we're setting, and we've got to think through this carefully and be careful what we're doing and what the possible outcomes can be.
I have one more question, at least for this batch, and I would just ask you to hold your horses briefly there, Mr. Neti. Let me welcome aboard the conversation Mr. Thomas Musa as well, who is also with the Ghana National Association of Teachers. He actually heads that organization. Mr. Thomas Musa, thank you very much for joining the conversation, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening to my co-panelists and all the viewers and listeners.
Well, it still is morning, but thank you very much for joining. I'll be coming to you shortly. But back to you, Mr. Neti. So I just want to get this. As you spoke, you made mention of a level playing field. Earlier, you mentioned a level playing field. And then you spoke about the length of hair. I don't know how long the hair can go, but one thing I do know, there have been exchange students from other countries, the West, who have come to Achimota, exchange students, and they have had long hair, natty hair. Why is it different for them that they can, and I've seen pictures, by the way, Mr. Neti, I've seen pictures, a number of them, with some of these students who have come from different parts of the world on exchange programs to the Achimota school, and they were allowed to keep their hair as it was. So why not local students?
You've also seen students, I'm sure, of exchange students, expats, if you will, who've cut their hair. I don't know that I have an answer to why particular students, like I said, there have been exceptions. When you apply for it, it's considered on its merit. I'm not in management of Ashimoto School, so I can't be certain why those particular students were given a pass, if that's what they were given. But I also do know that even back in my day, there were foreign students, some of whom cut their hair, some of whom didn't. So I have to take the fit on this one and find out why. But it works both ways. Some of them did cut their hair, and yes, you're right, some of them didn't.
But if it's different strokes for different folks, if it's different laws for different people, is that not discrimination?
If that's, look, back to even permitting. A child who doesn't want to do any of the school chores, like I said, would say if you gave the one who has a medical chit permission not to do it, it's discrimination. It is, isn't it? But if there's method to it, if there's a reason behind it, then that makes up for that discrimination in that sense. So like I said, I can find out, but on the face of it, from what I know, there always was reason why exceptions were made for the rules that were given back in our day in school, and definitely I'm sure applies to today's rules and regulations as well.
Mr. Nete, do hold with us just a little while longer. There are a few more things I want to run by you with your permission, sir. But let me quickly move on to actually take on Mr. Musa. Thank you once more for joining us. Now, we've heard from the Old Achimota Association. In fact, you've just been listening to the Vice President, Mr. Nete. We've also heard from NAGRAT, and Angel Kabonu, president of that group, has been making forceful points about how he feels the GES shouldn't have done what it did with regard to the Achimota school. What is the stance of NAT on this entire matter? Are you in sync with what NAGRAT has been putting out?
Yeah, thank you very much. We believe that the school rules must be obeyed. And that must be said emphatically and with all the authority at our disposal.
It appears we're struggling with the connection when it comes to...
Okay. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Now, let us also be mindful here. If any child, for any reason, should be treated out of the room, the parents must report it. For example, if your child has a medical condition that the child should not eat pepper, the child should not eat salt, or the child has any medical condition, it behoves the parent, or it is the duty of the parent to bring same to the attention of the management of the school with evidence. And I repeat, with evidence. And once that is done, that can be kept. The reason why evidence must be provided is that it is because of Article 17 of the Constitution. So that nobody can come and claim that, why are you treating this person this way? Why are you also treating this particular person that way? So he must come showing evidence. So that must be kept on the person's record. In case anybody comes to challenge the school, the school can produce that particular record as the basis on which that particular person is treated in the way he's being treated, and not because the person is granted that particular exemption from the rule because of any other reason. So the third other thing we need to take note is that, look, I am happy that Article 14 reference has been made to Article 14. The child in question here is under 18 years. And we need to be mindful here. The child must be allowed to determine his own belief among other things. But in bringing up the child, the parents, and for that matter, the school authority, they have a hand together with the state. Let me give you some few examples. In recent history, some people came saying that they don't believe in blood transfusion. And so for them, when their children are sick, they will not take them to the hospital. And if the moment you want
Well, we're still struggling with the connection with Thomas Musa, but some very interesting points that he is making. And we're going to try to see whether we can actually have him make these points forcefully, or at least land with these points. There are a few more things I'd like to run by him, and should technology permit, I'll do exactly that. But I think we still have Mr. Nete on the line. Okay, so Thomas Musa, I do see you. Unfortunately, the connection is not so good. So if you could wrap up on that point so we move on to the next one, I'd be grateful.
Please, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, so let me conclude on this one.
Right.
So what I am saying is that if somebody cannot say that because I don't believe in blood transfusion, my son should also not be giving blood, should we look on for the child to die? No. So at this particular age, the interest of the child should be protected. And so if by obeying the school rules and the dreadlock would have to be cut down for the child to get the school, so be it. I think that's how it should be. And that the parents should not impose their belief on the child. I think the state should step in and get this thing corrected.
Don't you feel we're being anachronistic, if you like? We're staying rooted in the past when it comes to these issues. I recall in 2015, Angel Kabonu, who is with Nagrat, your counterpart, he actually made mention of the fact that there were some students from St. John's Grammar who were being prevented from sitting their exams because the headmaster felt their hair was a bit too bushy or unkempt. And for that reason, they had to trim their hair, cut it off, basically, before they were allowed to, sit these examinations. But at the same time, the same person has been saying that when foreigners come into the country, Caucasians, if you like, we shouldn't let them cut their hair because it makes them look ugly.
We cannot compare the two.
Don't you feel that we have an educational system that is adopting double standards? How is it that foreign students or exchange students can come here and wear their hair however they like, but those here can't do same? Why is that?
Please, that is premature. I indicated that before such exemptions are granted, they are granted based upon evidence and facts. And these things are documented, so that if anybody comes to challenge you, you can produce that particular evidence. The school authority do not just get up and grant exemptions to people without any records. Like I've told you, I started teaching since 1989. And before any exemption will be granted to any student, it will take evidence. And when it is taken, it is put on your personal file. Should anybody come to challenge why this person is being treated that way, we go to the file, we produce it. If the matter must go to the Attorney General, the same file is submitted, and it is justified why that particular person is giving that particular treatment, whether it is on health, whether it is on medical grounds, whatever it is, based upon the evidence adduced on the person's personal file, we can get it done. But what we are not talking about any discrimination here. Because of Article 17, we are mindful the way we handle the children. So please,
well, there we go again.
I have said, this child is below 70, this child is below 8, the way the things are going. If we allow this thing to stand, what will happen then is that tomorrow, if my belief is that I don't believe in blood transfusion and my child is sick, then I can also say that my child should not get blood transfusion and my child should die rather than get the blood transfusion. Is that the country we want to build? I don't think so. I don't think so. Once the person is below 18 years, the state can intervene, and the Achimota school, and for that particular providing service under Article 190 as education service, providing service to the public, Achimota's rules, and for that matter, all the rules of the SHS must be respected. Must be respected. These rules are tested, and they have been with us for years, and we think that they must be respected.
I will come to both of you on the court matter, but from different angles. And should time suffice, we would also like to hear from, whether on social media or via calls, hear from some of you out there with regard to what your thinking is about this issue. A lot of you have been talking on social media. It would be interesting to know what your thoughts are. But Mr. Musa, so this matter is going to court. At least one of the parents has said that he is going to pursue the matter in the court of law. Should the court rule that the school should admit them, or that schools henceforth should admit students with locked hair and all of that. What would be the feeling of NAT? Because we've heard from your counterpart again, from NAGRAT, who has said that if it went that way, then the teachers would also, have their own way of sewing. I'm choosing my words carefully. That sort of chaotic environment, because if it's chaotic from the student end, then it can be chaotic from their end as well. What is your thinking? If the court does rule that the school ought to admit them, what would be the approach of NAT on this matter?
If the thing is not broken, don't fix it.
Yes, but let's say the court rules that they should be admitted. What would be the stance of NAT then?
And I'm saying that if the system is not broken, you don't fix it.
Some people think it's broken.
That has been that since the system has been with that years. Many people are the justices of the Supreme Court, the Appeal Court, and all the courts, parliamentarians. Everybody has gone through. So once the thing is not broken, why do you fix it? So we think that the status quo is good in helping children. So our position is that if the rules are not broken or if the system is not broken, don't fix it.
Wouldn't you leave that to the law court to decide? Are you ruling for the court? The court hasn't ruled yet.
No, I am not. You're asking me, and I'm saying that if it is not broken, don't fix it. We will respect anything that the court will say. I am not a judge, and I cannot be a judge because I have not gone to the law school to go and become a judge. So I leave the rest to the court. But only thing I'm saying is that if the thing you fix things that are broken. So if the thing is not broken, why fix it? But we leave the rest to the court. Let it go. And I believe that the Supreme Court will look at it, look at the merit and demerit, and let us all be mindful of the effect of this particular thing of future generations and the upbringing and training of our children in our schools. Whatever the Supreme Court will say, we will abide by it.
All right. Mr. Musa, at least that will be one of my key takeaways from you. If the system is not broken, don't fix it. But wrapping up with you, Mr. Nete. So this matter is going to court. How do you feel about that? Do you feel it's going to drag the name of your esteemed institution, Achimota Senior High School, in the mud, in the mire? How does the Old Achimota Association feel about this entire situation? And should the court rule, again, the same question I posed to Mr. Musa, should the court rule that the school must admit these students, what would be the position that the OAA would adopt? Or better still, what would be your thinking on that?
Ben, you mentioned Achimota School's name being dragged in the mud. Truth of the matter is that I think that this whole furore has probably gained more traction than it ordinarily would have because it's Achimota School. Achimota School sells. It's a big brand. The media houses like to jump on Achimota School cases, everything. So we'll deal with the fallout of Achimota School. The bottom line, though, is that as an Achimota School brand, we are the brand that we are because of what we stand for and what we've built methodologically over time, over the last 94 years. We are open for change. We change internally. We're happy to have a discourse with input from everybody on how to make systems and processes better in our school and in any other school for that matter. I personally encourage the parents to go to court because I think this issue needs to be tested. I am no judge, but I struggle to see how a competent court of law will say that school rules don't matter and that any individual can come in and based on their personal preferences, their culture, their individual religion, they can set the rules of engagement. But then again, that's for the law courts to decide. Whatever it is that the law courts decide, though, Achimota School and Achimotans will always abide by the rule of law and whatever it is that the court decides. So whatever the outcome of that court case is, Achimota School will definitely abide by it. Like I said, I struggle to see any outcome where a court says school rules don't matter. But yes, I encourage the parents to test it for the betterment of the nation and for the whole educational system.
Mr. Joel Nete, I cannot express enough our gratitude to you, and same goes to you, Mr. Thomas Musa. Gentlemen, we're very grateful for your time with us this morning.
Thank you.
Delving into this conversation. Thomas Musa is General Secretary of the Ghana National Association of Teachers. Mr. Joel Nete, who's been gracious enough to give us his time, is Vice President of the Old Achimota Association. They actually joined us for the conversation.